Hey guys, welcome back to your Wit and Wisdom lesson for Thursday. I hope everyone's having an amazing week so far. You guys are so close to being done. I hope you had a great Earth Day and Wacky Sock Day yesterday. And I'm ready and excited for us to get started on our Wit and Wisdom lesson for today. As always, we're going to start off with some positive referrals and shout outs. Our first positive referral is going to Carol and Ivana, who were caught showing the value of community. They've been working really hard together every day to help each other out and complete their Wit and Wisdom assignments. This is a wonderful tool to use. Use your peers, use your classmates to help you in these assignments. That's perfectly okay. Make sure that you guys are writing your own independent answers like Carol and Ivana and not just copying each other, but call each other for help. And if you still need help, you can always come to office hours, which leads me to my next positive referral. Our next positive referral for today goes to Denicia for showing the value of grow. She's been working really hard on her goal of completing her Wit and Wisdom lessons. She came to office hours yesterday so that she could work through a really difficult question, and we were able to read the text and answer the questions together. So I want to give a big shout out to Denicia for staying true to her goal and working hard to accomplish it. After that, some class-wide shout outs. Big shout out to UT, you guys. I'm so proud of you. 75% of students in UT have completed their reading log and fluency reflections yesterday. Wow, that's amazing. Keep it up. Let's see if we can get all the way up to 100% of students doing their reading log every single day. And then a big shout out to Syracuse. They grew by 11% in getting their reading log and fluency reflections completed. Every single day, we just want to see more and more of what you guys are reading so we can celebrate you and shout you out. So let us know. How's independent reading going? What books have you loved to read? Send us a message and let us know. Let's remember our focuses for this week. We're working on top quality work. So that means we have complete sentences, capital letters, and punctuation. I know you guys are working on that in ELD too. Making sure that you guys are answering the question to the best of your ability. We know it's hard to get every question right, but we want to see you try your hardest, and I know you guys can do it. And our other focus is making sure all parts of the assignment are completed. If there's a question at the bottom, making sure you're scrolling all the way down so that you've checked every single question, and we can get those 100% on our classwork. Today, there's going to be a question that's stuck onto the next page. Make sure that you find question number 5 so you can get full credit for your work. As always, continuing on with Holes, Miss Klein's story time continues. I don't know about you guys, but I've been really enjoying reading Holes. It's such a good book. I think today I got up to chapter 819. So come join me. I've really enjoyed reading it. I'll be posting it for you in the daily reading section of your Google Classroom. And it's also on the KME School YouTube channel. If you want to watch it on a different device or you want to watch it with your siblings, go for it. It's a really good book. And we find out even more about the crazy things that are happening at Camp Green Lake. Yesterday was Earth Day, so happy belated Earth Day. It's the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, which is crazy. If you wanted to celebrate Earth Day, there's a website that was posted on your Google Classroom under Extension Activities that has some really cool things you can do. They've got drawing activities, videos, games, all related to Earth Day, and different activities you can do to celebrate the Earth. Let us know which ones did you like? Which ones did you do at home? So we're going to get started with our Wit and Wisdom lesson. We have looked at this picture before, and some of you even responded and told me where your parents or guardians were on the day that September 11th happened. We're going to look at this picture even closer today. And you guys are some really great art historians. I know Jeremiah's been rocking it out, making those art observations. I remember Jonathan making some really strong art observations. Allison doing a great job of pulling meaning out of art. So let's see what we can continue to find. You guys are going to take a minute to look at this image, and then I want you to pause your video, go into your classwork document for today, April 23rd classwork, and I want you to answer the following questions. Describe the lines in this image. So remember, any of those straight lines you can find, what shapes are they forming? And then what do those lines show us about the setting? Last time we looked at this image, you guys completed a notice and wonder chart about it, and so many of you had some really great observations or noticings about the firemen, what it looked like behind them, what they were wearing. So I'd love for us to look even deeper and try and figure out, what are these lines showing us? Pause your video. When you're done, we're going to come back and we're going to move on with our assignment. So now that you guys have answered about the lines, I want us to look even deeper. How do the lines in this image draw your eye around the image or make your eye move from different places? Remember, just like artists or people or painters, photographers also make really careful choices about the composition or what to include and what not to include in a photograph. So this picture was not a mistake. The photographer was really careful on what they wanted to include in this picture and how they arranged it. You guys did a great job of thinking about composition when we looked at the Boston Massacre image, and we thought about why Paul Revere might choose to place things in certain spots. So let's take a minute and think. How would your perspective change if the top half from the top of the flag up were cut off? It would be totally different. Take a minute and tell someone next to you or tell your computer. Now that we've thought about how our perspective would change, I want us to think about, how might this image connect to the other images we've looked at in this module? What does this image have in common with them? We've looked at George Washington crossing the Delaware. That's the one where George Washington's like standing up on his boat. We looked at the massacre, the Boston Massacre by Paul Revere. What do these images have in common? And then how are they different, or what's different? Go ahead, tell someone next to you or tell your computer. We're going to be looking even closer at this image later on in our module, but we want to be keeping it in mind for our lesson for today. As always, you know it's sushi time. So remember our essential question for Module 3, why is it important to understand all sides of a story? Our focusing question 4, what drove the Patriots to fight for their independence from Britain? And then our content framing question for today, what does a deeper exploration of Coop's and Samuel's actions and words reveal about the Patriots' great heart? Man, you guys, we have not talked about great heart for a long time, since Module 1. Remember, all about great heart. So we're going to be bringing back that idea of great heart as we move into our lesson for today. Now that we're thinking about great heart, I want you guys to come back to this image that we looked at about September 11th. How does this 9/11 photograph relate to our idea of great heart? Take a minute and think. When you have how it relates, I want you to whisper to your computer or tell someone sitting next to you. Now that we've been able to jog our memory a little bit about what it means to have great heart, we're going to be connecting that into Woods Runner. In your classwork document, you're going to see a chart that has 3 columns, a great heart column, a column for Coop, and a column for Samuel. You don't need to do anything with this chart yet, but you will need to fill it out throughout this lesson. Make sure that when you're filling this out, you have 2 or more entries or details under each column. So our goal is to get 2 for Great Heart, 2 for Coop, and 2 for Samuel. I'll explain more about how to use this chart in a little bit, but we're going to be using it as we read today. So first off, our column is, what does it even mean to have great heart? We need to remind ourselves from our earlier classes, like in September. So I want you to take a second and remind yourself, what does great heart mean? When you have an idea of what great heart means, I want you to pause this video, go into your document, and fill in that first column that's labeled Great Heart with 2 things Great Heart means. When you're done, you're going to come back, unpause our video, and we'll go over some more examples of what Great Heart might mean. If you can't remember what Great Heart means, think back to some of the people that we learned about in the beginning of the year. Anne Frank, Clara Barton, we read Love That Dog, all of those things. We're talking about figurative Great Heart. So now that you've gone into your chart and you've filled in 2 examples of what Great Heart might mean, let's go over some other examples you might have thought of. These are some that came to me. One thing that Great Heart means is being brave. Okay, there we go. Someone who has Great Heart is a brave person. Another thing Great Heart means is having courage. So if you wrote either of those 2 things down for your assignment in your chart, great job. Let's see, there's a few more that I thought of when I thought about the people we learned who demonstrated Great Heart. Sometimes sharing care and concern for another person is another way of showing Great Heart. Remember, Clara Barton showed a lot of care for other people by being a nurse on the battlefield. Sometimes having Great Heart means doing the right thing. Just like Malala, remember standing up for her right for education because it was the right thing to do, even though it was incredibly dangerous. And sometimes Great Heart can mean leading others to do the right thing. We've talked about Colin Kaepernick and his fight against police brutality. How is he leading others to do the right thing, showing that he has Great Heart? Now that we've gone over a few other examples of Great Heart and you've had some time to fill in your chart about Great Heart, I'm going to show you my chart. If you are having trouble coming up with your ideas, you can pause this video and add some of my examples to your chart. So you can include being brave, showing care and concern for another person, having courage, doing the right thing, or leading others to do the right thing. All of these and your examples are great ideas of how to show figurative Great Heart. When you've recorded at least 2 examples in your chart for Great Heart, you're going to unpause your video and we're going to move on with our lesson. So now that you guys have had a chance to fill in about what it means to have Great Heart, we're going to move on and read 2 new chapters today. We'll be reading chapter 10 and chapter 11. Chapter 10 is a pretty intense chapter. We're going to be looking to see, how does Coop demonstrate Great Heart? Your job is to follow along with me as I read chapter 10. You can follow along if you have the book at home, if you have an e-reader, or on this PDF that is linked to this assignment. If you're reading on the PDF and when you click on it, Woods Runner book, it's showing up that this PDF can't be shown. Make sure you go to the top right corner, click the 3 dots going down, and click Open in a New Window or a new tab. That will allow you to open the book. If you're reading with me in the PDF, we start on page 71. Remember, as we're reading, our job is to be thinking to ourselves, how does Coop demonstrate Great Heart? Chapter 10. This time, the sounds of men coughing and axes chopping wood for the fire awakened Samuel. He opened his eyes. The pain was much less, and saw that it was daybreak. Men were moving all around him. He started to roll, but the head pain stopped him, as well as the sudden memory that he had no pants on. The bedroll was next to him where Coop had put it. He snaked his pants out, pulled them on, and fastened them with the leather cord around his waist. The pain in his head had abated, that means had slowed down. It only jabbed if he moved suddenly. The wound felt tight, as if someone were pulling the top of his scalp together. When he unrolled the blanket, his rifle half fell out, and he saw that the lock had dirt jammed around the flint and pan, pushing up the striker plate, or frizzen, so the rifle was not able to fire. The men were making fire, tying bedrolls. One man had what looked to be a permanently bent left arm held up at a slight angle. He was sitting on the ground cleaning his rifle. It made Samuel feel embarrassed that his own lock was so dirty. He found his possibles bag in the blanket roll. This was a pouch with a powder horn attached that hung around his neck, where he carried odds and ends of equipment for cleaning and firing his rifle. Inside, he had a tiny piece of steel wire. After blowing the dirt out of the pan and frizzen and flint, he used the wire to clear the touch hole, which fed the jet of flame from the pan into the powder charge. Then he used an oily rag to clean the whole area and put some finely ground black powder into the pan. This was the ignition powder that the flint metal sparks would fire into the powder charge. He closed the frizzen over the pan, eased the hammer to half-cock, safety, and set the rifle aside. The fire had flared up as the men added wood. Samuel rose to his feet and went into the nearby bushes to relieve himself. His legs were wobbly, but seemed to work well enough, even though he felt weak as a kitten. As one part of his body got better, another would follow. As the pain in his head went down, the hunger in his belly came up. There was the entire back leg from an ox over the fire on a metal spit. An ox is like a bull or a cow. Last night, Coop had been cutting bits of it to put in Samuel's broth. Looking at it made Samuel even more ravenous. That means hungry. But the other men weren't eating, so he helped back. One, a thin man with a scraggly beard, saw Samuel looking at the meat. He pulled a knife, a really short sword, carved off a generous piece, and handed it to Samuel. You got to eat. We might walk long today, and it's going to be hard for you to keep up without your belly full. Thank you. Samuel took the meat. It was very tough, and he sat chewing and swallowing, watching the men clear up camp. While Samuel watched the men and ate, he also rolled and tied up his bedroll, making certain his powder was dry and his possibles bag was ready to go. But these men were even faster. Without speaking except to grunt and point, they seemed to get everything done with the least effort and in the quickest time. The ox was yoked, so it means tied around its neck, and tied off to a tree. The skid that Samuel had been on, which had two long tongues that went up either side of the ox and attached to the yoke, was hooked up and packed with extra equipment. The cooking pot, blankets, muskets, a small keg of powder and another of whiskey, and of all things, a drum left by the fleeing redcoats and Indians. Then the men came and stood by the fire. In silence, they cut pieces of meat and ate, drinking creek water out of a wooden bucket with a wooden dipper. Samuel still had dozens of questions, but since the men were silent as they stood staring into the fire while they chewed, he held his tongue. There were 7 men. When everybody was done eating, they each took a plug of tobacco and poked it in their cheek or lower jaw. They put the leftover meat on the skid, wrapped in a piece of green ox hide to keep the flies off, then used the bucket to fetch water from the creek to put the fire out. With no effort at all, they were moving along the trail. 2 men went well ahead, one left, one right of the trail. The rest formed a column, if 5 men could be called a column, just ahead of the ox and Samuel. In Samuel's weakened condition, there was absolutely no way he could have kept up with the men. But the ox saved him. He knew that oxen tended to plod a little less than 2 miles an hour, and this ox was slower yet. Even Samuel had no trouble keeping up with him, and when his legs felt a little weak, he would move on to the ox's side and hold on to the yoke, letting the ox pull him along for a time. Every hour and a half, the 2 men walking ahead would come in, and 2 others would move out. On one of these cycles, Coop came back and walked near Samuel. It was what Samuel had been waiting for. You kept me alive. Thank you. It weren't much. A little tobacco and spit and tough meat. I'd have been done if you hadn't come along. Maybe, maybe not. One never knows how a wind is going to blow. Why did you all come along? Where are you going? Coop spit. The men all spit, almost all the time. Samuel had once tried tobacco, first in a clay pipe, then taking a chew, and it had made him sick as a dog. He couldn't see the sense in using it, but all these men seemed to chew all the time and spit like fountains. Maybe something happened to your taster when you got older, he thought, so you didn't mind it. We're going to join up, Coop said, pointing east with his chin, and fight them redcoats. There be a feller named Morgan round about Boston City starting up Morgan's rifles. We all shoot rifles, and we figure to give them redcoats a taste of good shooting. They got nothing but muskets, good for nothing after 50, 60 yards. Carl here, he pointed up to where his brother walked beside the head of the ox. He can pink a man on a horse out to 200-300 yards every time. Wouldn't even know what hit him, nor where it come from. He nodded his chin at the group. Every man here can hit a foot square piece of paper every time at 200 yards. I suppose you could too, took a mind to it. I'm not sure about killing. You did that Indian back there, laying dead, and he had a bullet hole in him. I wasn't aiming. He shot, and I pulled the trigger. What you gonna do when you find your mam and pap? Shake hands with them that took 'em? Samuel felt like spitting too. I haven't thought that far yet. Best be thinking on it, and keep your powder dry and your pan primed. Right. Thing is, I don't even know there was anybody to fight. Who was good or bad? Which side to be on? Coop snorted. Don't take much thinking. Them that starts into killing people for no reason, them that comes and takes your folks with a rope around their necks, they's the bad ones. Your good people don't do that. What reason? Samuel stumbled on a rock. To his surprise, the ox was aware of it and hesitated to let him catch up. Why did those British redcoats and Indians attack us like that? There was no reason. We weren't against the crown or rebels or anything. Coop spit, nearly taking a fly off the ox's ear. He snorted. Redcoats doing it because they redcoats and ain't worth a tinker's damn. Following orders. Indians doing it because they was hired to do it. They's Iroquois. Most of them work for the English. Always have, always will. Ever since that French War. They get all the plunder they can carry and scalp money from the redcoats. Heard there's a man named Hamlin, some kind of redcoat officer, buys so many scalps they call him Hair Buyer Hamlin. What I don't understand is why they took your folks instead of killing. Oh, look, the front line is coming in. The column stopped by a clear water creek, and everybody drank. Then the men took the meat off the drag and sat in a circle, cutting pieces and chewing. At first Samuel hung back, but Carl motioned him to squat and eat. Samuel was feeling stronger by the minute, and the meat heated him like a fire. No one talked much except for Coop, and when they finished, they rose, took a chew of tobacco, and set off. Coop and another man went ahead. Samuel walked in silence, hanging on to the wooden shaft tied to the ox. It was mid-morning, and the sun fell through the tall trees on either side of the trail, so they seemed to be walking in a lighted green tunnel. Now and then, insects caught sunlight and flashed white like small lamps. Any other time, Samuel would have been taken by the beauty of it. But now he could not stop thinking of what Coop had started to say. Why hadn't the raiders killed his parents? And would they do it now? I'm way behind them, he thought. 6, maybe 7 days. Dragging along with an ox. God only knows what's happening to them. I have to go faster. The Hessians. The British also used mercenary soldiers. So those are soldiers that are paid to be soldiers, that are not working for the government. issued with the same Brown Bess musket and bayonet. Most of them were troops from Germany, called Hessians. While they were relatively effective as combat soldiers, they brought with them such savage, atrocious, that means horrifying, behavior, and committed war crimes so far outside civilized behavior. Bayoneting, stabbing unarmed captive soldiers who had surrendered, farmers, women, including pregnant women, children, and even infants, that they became known as little more than beasts and were treated in kind. So they were also treated like beasts. So now that we finished reading chapter 10, your job is to go back into your chart and to list out 2 ways that Coop demonstrates a great heart. They can be things that you just heard from chapter 10, or it can be examples from earlier in the book. It's up to you. You want to get at least 2 ways Coop demonstrates great heart. When you're done, you're going to come back to the video and we'll move on with chapter 11. So now that you've filled in your chart for Coop, our next job is to fill in our chart for Samuel. We're looking for ways that Samuel demonstrates great heart. We'll be reading chapter 11. Chapter 11 starts on page 82 of the Woods Runner book PDF if you're following along in that way. A quick note about chapter 11. It is a little bit intense and shocking. It's also a very long chapter. So do your best. One way that I like to follow along is making sure that I'm reading with the person who's reading and then writing down examples as I hear them. That way you don't have to go back and then finish up your video. So let's get started. Chapter 11. He lay under overhanging hazel brush and studied the farm. Here, very close to the middle of the wild, was an almost perfect little farm. It had been 3 days since Samuel left the men behind. He'd eaten more and more meat, become stronger and stronger, and at last couldn't stand the slowness of walking beside the ox. The men were in no particular hurry, or, as Coop put it, still gonna be a war, catch it now or catch it later. And they had gear to move, so had to go slowly. But Samuel became more frantic with every step. At last, when they'd stopped to rest, he had told Coop he was going to take off on his own. Coop had nodded. "There'll be people wanting to kill you," he said. "Well, let me cut those stitches out of your head. Healed up good." He set to work as he spoke. "Almost everybody you meet will maybe want to kill you. So keep to the brush, keep your head down, and don't walk where others walk." He took out the last stitch. There was nothing more to say, so with a nod, Samuel turned away and trotted ahead of Coop and the rest of the men. Samuel took the advice to heart and worked well off the trail, which was becoming more like a road with 2 tracks. Even so, he doubled his speed. He had brought meat with him and took care to eat sparingly, so that means eat only a little at a time. After 3 days, it was nearly gone. He'd have to get more soon. Deer were as thick as fleas, and it was just a matter of shooting one. He was moving quietly through the woods, ready to do just that, when he came upon the farm. It had not been attacked and burned. It was a shock to see buildings standing and unharmed. And aside from that, this was a proper farm, not a frontier cabin hacked out of the woods. True, there was deep forest all around, but the farm itself was neat as a pin, with split rail fences all whitewashed and a frame house, and a barn made not from logs, but from milled lumber. More, the house was painted white, and the barn red, with white trim on the doors and windows. As he watched, he could see chickens in the yard. Several thoughts hit him. First, chicken would taste good. The thought of a roasted chicken made him salivate. Second, if they hadn't been attacked, it must mean they were friendly to the raiders, who must have come right through here. Third, An easy jump in thinking. It would be all right for Samuel to confiscate, that means take, a chicken, assuming the farmer was friendly with Samuel's mortal enemy. Now, how to bring it about? He could wait until dark, but that was still at least 8 hours away. He couldn't waste time sitting here. The farm was in the middle of a large clearing. The tree line came close to the barn. If he worked his way through the trees, he might get close enough to grab a chicken and run. He was moving before he stopped thinking of it. Since he saw no people as he moved around to the clearing in back of the barn, he moved fast. He kept the barn between him and the house to block their view. In moments, he stood against the barn wall, not 10 feet from a small flock of chickens pecking at the ground. Just as he started to make his move, he heard a scraping sound overhead, and the barn loft door opened. A little girl, 8 or 9, was looking down at him. I saw you through a crack in the wall the whole way. You thought you was sneaking, but I saw you. You look like a big 2-legged deer. What's wrong with your head? How come you're running like that? What are you after? Oh, the chickens. You want a chicken? Go ahead. I don't like them anyway. Samuel was so stunned he couldn't say anything. Then he croaked in a whisper. Is there anybody else here? They's all up the house eating. They's eating squash, and it makes me puke. So I came to the loft to play with my dolls. Go ahead, I won't tell. Thank you. Take the big red one. She's mean. Chases me all over the yard and pecks at my toes. In for a penny, in for a pound, Samuel thought. He made a darting motion and by luck actually caught the big red chicken. It squawked once, but he held it tight and it quieted. He started to leave, then turned. What's your name? Anne Marie Pennyworth Clark, she said, but everybody calls me Annie. Well, thank you, Annie. I've got to be going now. He turned to leave, but her next words stopped him. You look just like the man who was here, except he was older and his head wasn't all cut up. What man? Some men and a woman came here, some on horses and some in a wagon. At that instant, an enormous man holding a rifle came around the end of the barn. He had shoulders like a bear, and his gun was pointed at Samuel's face. Samuel dropped the chicken, raised his own rifle, and aimed it at the center of the man. After a second, Samuel lowered his weapon. As soon as it moved, the man dropped his. Samuel had forgotten to breathe. He took a deep breath now. My name is Samuel, he said. I thought a fox was in the chickens when I heard the hen squawk. The man shrugged. Wasn't too far off. I don't steal. Samuel's face burned. But I've been on some rough trail and I got hungry. He wasn't stealing, Pa, Annie piped up. I told him to take that red one. She keeps trying to eat my toes. I never turned anybody away from my door hungry, the man said. He held out his hand. Caleb Clark, come up to the house and eat. It all seemed so natural and open that Samuel forgot his earlier suspicion that the farmer was on the enemy's side. He took the man's hand. Thank you, sir. Let's stop by the pump and wash your head first. It's a sight. Ma will have a fit. I got hit by an Indian, and these men came along and sewed me up. It looks, Caleb smiled, like you got hit by a club, and then some men stitched it up and smeared some kind of dark mud or something on it. Tobacco juice, Samuel said, and spit. They made a poultice, and it saved me. They were at the watering trough and pump. Caleb took Samuel's rifle. Samuel handed it over without thinking. Caleb held Samuel's head under the pump and started working the handle. Scrub, he said, pumping harder. Samuel winced at the pain but went to work, carefully. Finally, the wound was clean enough to suit Caleb, and they went to the house. Annie followed, and sure enough, the red hen pecked at her toes. Annie yelped and scurried ahead of Samuel and Caleb to the house. Samuel had never been in anything but a cabin, most often with a dirt floor, or at best a crude plank one. And Caleb's house seemed too fine, as if Samuel somehow shouldn't be allowed in it, at least not without being boiled clean first. The house inside was as neat as the outside, with plastered white walls and a sugar pine board floor, polished and rubbed with beeswax. "Company, Ma," Caleb said. "You got another plate?" Caleb's wife was quite round, with red cheeks and hair up in a bun. She had flour dust on her cheek. She pushed a bit of hair back and smiled at Samuel with the briefest of looks. She pointed at a chair that backed to the stove. "Sit and eat. We just started." There were only 3 people, 4 with Samuel, but the table absolutely groaned with food. There was squash, as Andy had said, with maple sugar and butter melted in the middle. There was a roast of venison is deer meat, and potatoes, a loaf of bread with apple butter, and some kind of jelly, corn on the cob with melted butter dripping from the cobs. Samuel had never seen anything like it. Huge bowls of food, and a gravy tub that held at least a quart of rich brown, steaming hot gravy. His stomach growled as Caleb poured him some buttermilk, and they all sat. There were a fork and spoon and knife at each place. Samuel waited to see how things were done. Caleb smiled. "We'll say grace." They held hands, which seemed strange. Annie was to his left. She decided that since he was there, she'd sit to eat, and she grabbed his hand. Caleb's big paw took his other hand, and in a deep voice he rumbled, "Thank you, Lord, for this food and this company. In Jesus' name, amen." And they set to. Nobody spoke. Ma heaped his plate with food. It seemed more than he could possibly eat. He was sure his stomach had shrunk, but he somehow got it all tucked in and felt full as a tick. Then Ma brought out rhubarb pie with thick cream, sprinkled with maple sugar, and somehow he got that down as well. "Thank you, ma'am," he said. "I've never eaten like that, not in my whole life. Even at fall feast it wasn't that good or that much. I won't have to eat for a week. I just wish my folks—" He stopped, remembering what Annie had said. He turned to her. "You said some men came and one of them looked like me." Caleb cut in. "Some British soldiers came here with 2 wagons holding fugitives or captives. 5 of them. I fed the soldiers and they were civil enough and didn't bother us, though I heard some bad stories of the Hessians that hit some farms east of here. Then I took food and went out to the captives, and one man had his wife with him, was very polite and thanked me. He looked like you, same eyes and nose. He was my father, and that was my mother." Samuel looked down at the floor and blinked away the burning in his eyes. Annie softly patted his shoulder. He told the story of the attack, leaving out the worst details because of Annie. When he was finished, Ma was crying, and he was having trouble holding tears back himself. "When were they here?" he asked. "How long ago?" 2, no, 3 days. After they ate, they watered the horses, and while they were waiting for the horses to blow and settle the water, the lead officer pulled out a little traveling chessboard. I don't know how to play, but he went to the captives, and your pa sat and played a game with him on the edge of the wagon. He loves chess. I heard the officer say to another soldier that the only reason he brought your father was that he saw a chessboard when they raided the cabin, and he wanted somebody to play with. Thank God, Samuel thought. Thank God for such a little thing to mean so much. His father's life spared for a chessboard. His mother's life, too. He stood. "Thank you for the food. I have to be going. If I'm only 3 days behind and they keep taking it slow, I could catch them." Caleb said, "They're headed for New York, this city. The British hold it, and they keep a lot of prisoners there in old warehouses and out in the harbor on old ships. If you don't catch them along the trail, you might just go there. Good luck to you, son. We'll keep you in our prayers." Ma pressed more food on him: venison, potatoes, and corn, wrapped in a piece of linen. Annie and Ma hugged him, and Caleb shook his hand. Then he trotted slowly, his stomach still heavy, out of the yard to the edge of the woods, where he entered thick forest. He stayed well off to the side of the trail. Once again, this small act saved his life. He heard one clink, metal on metal, and dropped to his stomach, out of sight, though he could see through gaps in the brush. He watched them pass, an organized body of troops, with tall hats moving at a quick step in a tight formation. They followed an officer on a large bay horse. They did not look like British soldiers. They had brownish instead of red uniforms, and were more disciplined than the Redcoats. Hessians, he thought, Germans. They were quickly past Samuel. Their march would take them directly to Caleb's farm. Curious, and with some fear, Samuel turned and followed them, off to the side, 50 yards to the rear. He'd relive that decision for many sleepless nights. The attack was over in minutes. The Hessians quick marched into the yard, broke formation, and spread out into the farmyard, grabbing chickens as they moved. Caleb and Ma came out onto the porch. Caleb wasn't armed, though he raised his arm and pointed it at the soldiers. He and Ma were instantly gunned down. Then 4 soldiers jumped to the porch and bayoneted them. Annie exploded out of the house and ran toward the barn. 3 or 4 of the soldiers shot at her but missed, and once she was around the barn, she ran for the trees. More men tried to hit her but missed. Samuel was amazed at how fast she ran. She stumbled once, and it looked as if she might be hit, but she jumped to her feet and kept running. They took the bodies of Caleb and Ma and dragged them back into the house. 8 or 10 men went in the house and looted it, so stealing, taking anything shiny and all the food they could find. Then they set fire to the house and barn, and when those were roaring with flames, the soldiers fell into formation and quick marched out of the yard, disappearing down the trail. It had taken less than 10 minutes. Samuel was sickened by the cruelty, the absolute viciousness of the attack, and he hunched over and retched, means threw up. He felt that he should have run to Caleb and his wife to help in some way, but knew there was nothing he could have done. He would have been dead long before he got at them. He was helpless. He sat crying, watching the house and barn burn, the Hessians gone like a plague. Caleb and Ma, the food, eating together, how open and gentle and pleasant and good it had been to sit with them and talk. Destroyed, gone. Gone in this ugly war with these evil men. Gone and never coming back. And there was nothing he could do or could have done to save them, help them. Except find Annie. Take her with him to New York. He made certain nobody was coming down the trail, then set off at a trot around the clearing, staying well in the undergrowth, looking for Annie and trying to erase from his mind what he had seen. He had to find Annie, then his parents. That was all that mattered. So now that we finished chapter 11, your job is to go back into your chart for today and to list 2 reasons or examples that Samuel demonstrates great heart. These can be examples from chapter 11 that you heard, or they could be examples that we read earlier in the book. When you're done, you're going to answer the 2 questions underneath your chart. How does Coop demonstrate great heart? How does Samuel demonstrate great heart? Make sure you're answering them in complete sentences. When you're done, you're going to come back and we'll finish our lesson. So make sure before the end of this lesson, you have at least 2 entries in every column of our chart. 2 for what it means to have great heart, 2 for how Coop shows great heart, and 2 for how Samuel shows great heart. The last thing we're going to do is explain how Coop and Samuel show great heart in their decisions. This is question number 5 that we make sure you can find on the second page. You can choose to write your response to this summary in either first person narration, so remember that's I, me, my, where you pretend to be Samuel or Coop, or you can write it in third person narration, he, she, they, as a narrator of the story. It's up to you. Make sure you explain how both characters show great heart in their decisions. When you're done, you'll come back to this lesson and we'll finish. Great job, you guys. You made it to the end of your Wit and Wisdom lesson. So before 8 p.m. today, you know the drill. Make sure you've completed all 5 parts of your lesson and you've clicked the Turn In button. Remember, we're working on top quality work, so it's not a matter of how fast you get it done, but making sure you get all the parts correct. Then you want to make sure you're practicing your fluency with the American Spirit passage that's been posted in daily reading and completing that daily reading and fluency log. Remember our challenge, UT, 75% to 100% of kids completing the reading log, and for Syracuse, growing by even more. Howard, you guys are crushing it. Great job, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Bye.